Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance and money management.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch podcast. Hello, Ben. How you going?
G'day, mate. How are you?
Pretty good,
Up
mate.
and about, mate. Up and about. Woohoo!
Well, before you get to tell me what you're up and about with, I just got a little story for you.
All right, please tell.
Got up this morning.
Yes.
Kids got KO on. And what are they watching? Unprovoked by me, Ben. This is not a stitch up.
Yeah.
They're watching the 2002 AFL Grand Final.
2002. Well, we obviously didn't win that one, so. Yeah.
Oh, well, that was my question because Brisbane were they were just about 3 points behind deep into the fourth quarter. So I thought, maybe Collingwood wins. But I just wanted to check to see, did they get the chocolates or did Brisbane?
No, Jason Ackermanis snapped over his shoulder after a throw-in from the boundary line to take it. I think they won by 5 points in the end.
Yeah, no, I did know the result.
Another one of
that'd be a nice little way to start the day.
Yeah, look, it didn't really get it. You know, we weren't given a chance that day. Boys played
exceptionally
here we
well. Go. Are you really going to go here?
Very, very happy with, the efforts. It was Herculean would probably be the word. You know, everyone was tipping Brisbane by 10 goals. So it came very close. Very close. Very proud of the boys that day. They did a great job.
What are you up and about?
We're playing finals, Bryce.
Yeah,
we're playing. And you've got a smoky, few things for your way. Do you sneak in, or you? No, you don't. That's unfortunate. I actually knew that.
All right, fair enough.
There we go.
Well played.
1-1.
One all. I see. So, hey, you had to pick a webinar last night, mate. How'd it go?
Yeah, terrific. Yeah, good turnout rates, and all of those people who are PICA members will get a on-demand copy of that in the members area of the PICA website. So, obviously Peter Kalousos, the property professor, was on song again last night. So some great insights in terms of his views on the market, and also looking at those PIPA insights from the sentiment survey. So yeah, we'll probably lean into that. It's the favourite saying at the moment, isn't it? Or I'm changing from lean in to double click. We're going to double click on that one and have a look at those results in an upcoming episode, as we've promised before. So yes,
keep Control Z on the lean in so that you can Control Y on the double click.
Boom.
So what I'm hearing is Pick-a-Flix, Ben. Pick-a-Flix. So for $5 you can go and get Pick-a-Flix.
Ah, nice. There's a subscription, and it's not monthly either. It's for a whole year, or 20 for 5 years. So yes.
Or Investorflix.
Yeah, I like it. Nice one.
There you go. Hey, Ben, we've got an upcoming podcast that we're going to launch, you and I. Did you know that?
I did only know that this week. I was very excited to hear.
Yeah. So basically, you and I have we've read our book out on Facebook Live, over 10 Facebook Lives, and it was heaps of fun. We concluded yesterday.
Summarise the book. You don't get me to read the book, remember?
No, well, the thing is, the audio book is obviously word for word, but you and I were giving backstories, anecdotes, some stories, some concepts, some behind the scenes.
Lots of fun.
So what Ivis and Emma are doing at the moment is they are cutting all the audio from underneath that, Ben, and then we're going to upload it. So if anyone wanted to just go and binge listen to those 10 episodes on the Armchair Guide podcast, we'll make that available. So we'll let some folks know about that soon. But that's
awesome.
That's going to be a little bit of fun. I'm looking forward to that. So we'll keep you posted when Stig and Emma have tweaked and fine-tuned that. But that should be in the next couple of weeks, I'd say. Hopefully, I haven't put the girls under pressure on a couple of weeks. Hey, my mindset minute theme today, Ben, is clearly just for those. I make the assumption that everyone's listening to each and every one of our episodes, Ben, but some people might be tuning into this one for the first time, or it might be their second or third. So what I've been doing is running through what I think is arguably one of the greatest books ever you should read. I said at the beginning of this, Ben, that if I had to Control Alt Delete and quit on every book that I know except for one, it'd be this one. I'd start with this one because I reckon I could rebuild everything back if I know what's in the pages of this one. So I have gone through this and I'm up to chapter 8, Ben. Now, I just want to recap because we're going through the 6 ways to make people like you. So first way was to become genuinely interested in other people. The second way was to smile. The third way was to remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language, Ben. The fourth way was be a good listener, encourage others to talk about themselves. So chapter 8 is all about the fifth way, Ben, which is how to interest people. All right. So as I've been doing, I've pulled out a few key quotes. What I will say is this book, Ben, is full of stories. And do you know when you read a technical non-fiction book, it's got all this heavy lifting around concepts.
Mm-hmm.
It's just full of anecdotes, and usually anecdotes from the 30s and 40s in industrialized America, and it's just really good. So I've pulled out a couple of things that I want to focus on. So everyone who was ever a guest of Theodore Roosevelt was astonished at the range and diversity of his knowledge. Whenever Roosevelt expected a visitor, he sat up late the night before reading up on the subject in which he knew his guest was particularly interested. So, Ben, there's a good little tip. So for Roosevelt, as all leaders know, that the road to a person's heart is to talk about the things he or she treasures the most. So, fun fact for you, Ben. Do you know that Stiggy loves whiskey, right?
I do. I bought her the odd bottle every now and then.
Well, funny you say that. I did a similar thing just recently, but I know nothing about whiskey. I'm not a drinker. I don't know what's a good one, what's a bad one. So, but I know that's what she's interested in, right? So what I did is I went to my brother-in-law, and I said, mate, teach me about whiskey. I got no idea what's a good one, what's a bad one, all that sort of stuff. So I went through that process. So clearly, to speak to Ivis, I went and found out what she was interested in. And then actually went and did my research so that I could actually be informed. Now, it's arguable whether I made the right choice, and I'm sure she'll let me know at some stage. But
as long as it was single malt, she'll be happy.
Well, it was single malt.
So there you go. There's the research. Good.
Because early I thought single versus double. I didn't know, right? So clearly you know your whiskey. I know nothing about whiskey.
No, I just know what Ivis wants, and it's an easy present for her for her anniversaries or special gifts.
Yeah. and then our wonderful M. You two were talking about last week Bikram yoga, right? I had no idea what Bikram yoga was, right? But you did, Ben. So it makes me suspicious that you are a closet Bikram yoga dude.
No, it was a long time ago, Bryce.
But Emma loves yoga. She loves Bikram yoga. So what was interesting is I don't know if you've seen on Netflix. There's a program called Jake Whitehall's Travel with My Father. It's so funny. He's a comedian. His dad is like almost 2 generations apart, and they went into this yoga studio, and I couldn't help but think of him because there was these dudes in there, and they were all doing Bikram, but they'd gone down to absolutely nothing, Ben. So I thought. Right. Closet. I was thinking maybe that's that. Maybe
no, don't do it. No, never.
But here's the thing, right? We know that Em loves
goes.
yoga. We know that Ivis loves whiskey. So it's all about understanding what other people are interested in. So he goes on to say, as I write this chapter, I have before me a letter from Edward L. Challiff, who was active in Boy Scout work. One day I found I needed a favour, wrote Mr. Challiff. A big Scout jamboree was coming off in Europe, and I wanted the president of one of the largest corporations in America to pay the expenses of one of my boys for the trip. Fortunately, just before I went to see this man, I heard that he had drawn a cheque for $1 million. Now, let's remember that this book was written back in the 30s, Ben. So $1 million was
a lot of money.
That was a lot. And that after it was cancelled, he had it framed. So the first thing I did when I entered his office was to ask to see the cheque. A cheque for $1 million. I told him I never knew that anybody had ever written such a cheque, and that I wanted to tell my boys that I'd actually seen a cheque for $1 million. He gladly showed it to me. I admired it and asked him to tell me all about how it happened to be drawn. You notice, don't you, that Mr. Challiff didn't begin by talking about the Boy Scouts or the Jamboree in Europe or what it was that he wanted. He talked in terms of what interested the other man. Here's the result, Ben. Presently, the man I was interviewing said, "Oh, by the way, what was it that you wanted to see me about?" So I told him. To my vast surprise, Mr. Challiff continues, he not only granted immediately what I asked for, but much more. I'd asked him to send only one boy to Europe, but he sent 5 boys and myself, gave me a letter of credit for $1,000, a lot of money back then. and told us to stay in Europe for not 2 weeks, Ben, not 4 weeks, but 7 weeks. He also gave me letters of introduction to his branch presidents, putting them at our service, and he himself in Paris showed us around the town. Since then, he's given jobs to some of the boys whose parents were in want, and he's still active in our group. Yet I know if I hadn't found out what he was interested in and got him warmed up first, I wouldn't have found him 1/10 as easy to approach. So Ben, talking in terms of other people's interests pays off for both parties. Howard Z. Herzig, a leader in the field of employee communications, has always followed this principle. When asked what reward he got from it, Mr. Herzig responded that he not only received a different reward from each person, but that in general, the reward had been an enlargement of his life each time he spoke to someone. How good has that been?
That is a good story, Bryce. Love good stories.
There is some wisdom in that. So principle number 8, talk in terms of the other person's interest. So here we got, Ben. We got someone write into us last week. It was Steve Bates, listener of ours, said, outstanding. Thanks, guys. I really loved your episode 303, the 3 money rules for life. One question I have is, how do I get my kids, 15-year-old, 19-year-old, 23-year-old, to listen to this golden information? Whenever I talk about money and investing early in life, they zone out and say I'm old. Good tips on how to get teens and kids on board would be great. Thanks again. P.S. You guys do tend to talk a lot about the footy, in brackets, not the real kind -NRL, but a good listen anyway. So there you go, Ben. Some like the footy, some don't.
Well, go the Rabbitohs. That's it. And go the Storm.
Storm.
So when the Rabbitohs are doing well, that's great. When
So I enjoy
Storm
talking
always
to
do
those boys.
well.
Sorry?
I was going to say, when the Rabbitohs are doing well, I talk them up because that was where I used to live in Sydney and used to for the team I used to follow. But now I live in Melbourne. I've got the Melbourne Storm, right? So we're pretty reliable, pretty reliable.
So, Steve, what I'd say to you is, if we think about what Dale Carnegie's saying in the book, we need to talk about things that interest your children. So if you think about our podcast, warm them up. We've got Andrew Bogut. We've got Matt Schramer. If they're into sport, we've got sport. If they're whatever they're interested in, we've had Rachel Cole, who's in the arts. We've got a whole bunch of people who have come onto our podcast. So first of all, find out what they're interested in, and then think about what is it that we have an episode that might be interesting to them, because that's number one. And then number two, I'd quickly work out what is important to them, the things that they like around if they're into cricket or basketball or reading or whatever it is. Frame the conversation around the money lessons that we're talking about in terms of what it is that they are interested in, so that you can get them to do what they want to do rather than what you want them to do. That's
good. Couple of technology shows in there too, Bryce. Remember the one we did with the boys from Foria on virtual reality, and also we had Nigel from the REA group who took us through some of the technology stuff. So there's some fun stuff in there as well. So that might be the warm up. There you go. A couple of ideas if they're not into sport.
So hopefully that works, Steve. But I get, I've got kids of my own who roll their eyes at anything that I'm interested in. I've started just talking about Minecraft a lot, Ben. I don't know about you. That seems to work. Jack loves Minecraft. So
yes, my boys have built very, very big mansions with 13 levels, underground pools, all fun stuff. So yes, I have seen some of their
building
creations.
The residents, are they? Just modelling at home?
No, humble residents, mate. Nothing to see here.
Very good. So there you go. Hopefully that helps, Steve. But I think we've done an episode previously about maybe Stig can help with when we did talk about money tips for kids. So we'll put a link in the show notes for that as well. Hey, today's Q&A day, Ben.
Love it.
It's exciting. We got some really great questions. Now, I usually shout out to people and say, hey, look, I want you to come and talk to us on SpeakPipe. Let us know what questions you have. Today, we've got 5 queued up, Ben. We've got some great ones. So
awesome.
All right, Ben. So our first question today is from Trevor. Let's have a listen to that now.
Hi, Ben and Bryce. My name is Trevor. I'm 47, work full-time and I'm single. I've got 3 investment properties I've bought. First one, 99. I bought a 2-bedroom unit in Darwin and Milner, which went up dramatically and since it's just as dramatically decreased in value and rent. Has a high strata of $1,500 a quarter. I do have another house in Brisbane, Waterford West, bought in 2008, 4x2x2, which is probably what I paid for it now, worth what I paid for it now. And another house in Adelaide I bought in 2010, a 3-bedroom in lovely suburb called Davron Park. I think you get the picture. So probably not the best property choices. I feel like I'm treading water. They're all rented. They, except for Darwin's decline in rent, they all rent quite well. My accountant says it's costing me $5,000 a year just to keep these properties. I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere with them. I've done this since '99 now, and I don't want to look back in 10 years and think, gee whiz, I wish I did something different. At times, I feel like taking the money out and putting it into something else. Now, if I was to sell, sad case, the properties are worth $3 with a mortgage of $3.50. Any suggestions for people and that get into these situations? I know it's not a good scenario. I don't have X amount to spend on a lovely new property, but it is a situation. And going forward, what would you recommend? Thank you.
Ben.
Well, poor Trevor. I mean, this is a frustrating exercise because most people are told you just buy anything and you just wait for time. And time fixes all wounds. Well, obviously in the marketplaces that Trevor has looked to buy and potentially his, justification in buying in those areas, i.e. Darwin with strata fees, well, that says to me that it's some form of, sort of a flat or apartment or alike. And so that is not necessarily a market that I would say has strong appeal on the land component, being Darwin being a very small marketplace, even though, you've got a pretty good health and, high income market up there. There's just no drivers that are seeing that population growth and seeing pressure on prices. So they had a building boom a couple of years ago, and at one point there, over a 10-year period, I think it was about 2007 until 2017, or even a 5-year period there, that was, they were the number one performing because they had, that gas infrastructure that was built, they had the port infrastructure that was built, they had the US announced that they were going to put a Air Force base there. So there was a lot going on, but obviously that's all played out slowly, and their building boom around the apartments that they built there, they have performed really poorly. And so Trevor is a victim of that. In terms of, again, looking at those properties that he's bought in Brisbane and Adelaide, I suspect the Brisbane property over the course of the next couple of years will probably get a ripple effect. And I suspect that he will start to see a better valuation on those, subject to obviously the economy in Brisbane improving, and the low COVID rates that they've had gives them that good momentum, hopefully, to see that happen. And Adelaide, well, again, we don't know where he bought that 3-bedroom house in Adelaide. So if it is an outer suburb or a new estate area, that's potentially going to be challenged. So it just highlights that, in terms of buying middle suburbs, buying inner suburbs, and in land scarcity and competition for that land scarcity and infrastructure and improvement and investment going into those areas will give you a better result. And that's that's what we're passionate about teaching around asset selection and timing the market using, the measures of demand and supply.
Yeah, no, some really good points that you make, Ben, right? So for me, it's just a reinforcement around the game is not about just getting your name on a title. The game is actually getting your name on the right title. And you just sort of reinforced that at the end of your point there, because unfortunately for Trevor, you can see that there's definitely that one you talked about in Darwin hasn't performed. But to be in a position where you got $3 worth of value for every $3.50 worth of debt, clearly is not a position you want to be in over when you've been in the game for 21 years.
Yeah, you're not going to liquidate the whole portfolio potentially. What you're going to be considering, and this is the hard bit, right? The one that's probably underperforming the most is going to be the hardest to sell, because I suspect if Trevor is in a medium or high density apartment block there in Darwin, there's going to be a lot of properties for sale. And there's not much demand for buying those properties in the current environment. So that's his hard position. And we're seeing that, that's the hardest thing you've got to tell people who come in and present their portfolio to you. And you've got to go, oh, yeah. So that one you've got out there where you bought out in the mining town, yep, that's gone from $400,000 down to $150,000. And you're like, well, so is it even worth selling? Because you've got negative equity there and there's no buyer within cooee of that property. But effectively, you are unofficially on the market anytime you can get anywhere remotely near what you need to get for that particular location. So that's tough. I mean, it really is tough. So, I'd love to talk to Trevor and say, what was your justification for buying in those areas, and how much research did you do? Were you influenced by someone who had an agenda that was in their best interest in making commission off you? All of those questions are real, and it means that even though he's amassed a portfolio of 3 properties, there is opportunity cost that he has had to forego, and that's hard, and it's tough. And so I suspect he shouldn't necessarily be keeping all 3 of those properties in his portfolio. But the ones we talked about earlier, I think Adelaide, depending on where it is the question mark. I think, as I said, the rising tide lifting all ships with low interest rates. Brisbane more generally, I'm a little bit more comfortable with. But again, I don't know what he's bought, where it is, how much oversupply is there. So that's why we talk about our seller hold assessment tool that we've built, our research platform that we built. If you want to learn more about that, it does talk about recycle costs, and then looking at markets where you might be able to get that return into a better market and put that money to work and hopefully get a better return. So I think his accountant's right to sort of say, hey, you've got all this capital deployed, and you're getting a negative return. So that's challenging. I think Trevor needs to go and get some professional help.
Agree. A couple of things, Ben, to give encouragement to Trevor is we have seen people come to us with multiple duds before, and it hasn't been like there's no choice or there's no hope. So clearly, just because you have had 21 years of performance that's left you $3 for every $3.50 doesn't mean that the next 20 years have to be like that. Because my next point, Ben, is thankfully he's 47, not 57, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
there's a whole decade ahead, right, where arguably one of the greatest decades in this country to be building a residential property portfolio. So I'm sure Trevor has dark days around the performance of the asset, right? But it doesn't mean that you can't recover from here. So Waterford West, that's in the Logan Shire, Ben. So quite well known for its yields down there.
Yep.
So that might still do some heavy lifting in the portfolio. You mentioned Adelaide. We buy in Adelaide. So it could be in a spot that is providing also good yield. So that means that it might just need a little bit of balance of growth. You said that you need some advice. I'd agree with that. And it's all about making sure that your next move is critical and really beginning with the end in mind, so we know what we're shooting for, so we know that the decisions that we're actually making are in context to a bigger plan rather than just confusing activity with accomplishment. Because I can rock in a rocking chair all day, Ben. I can do it for 8 hours, and it gives me something to do, but I'll go absolutely nowhere. So you don't want to confuse activity with accomplishment. So Trevor, hopefully that's helped. And also just anyone who we're reading out, Ben, we're going to give them a copy of our audiobook. So Trevor,
great.
Reach out to us. Free copy of the audiobook coming your way. Hopefully you can implant some of the concepts that we've talked about that are timeless and evergreen to help you with your next move. But thanks for sharing that. And there's definitely hope in this picture, depending on what your next move is. Okay, here's our next one, Ben. It's a good one. It's from Kylie Wood. Let's have a listen to Kylie's question now.
Hi guys, my name's Kylie. Love the podcast. I've just ordered your book and I'm sure the answers to my questions are in it. While I wait for the book, I want to get started sorting out my finances. I'm pretty good at budgeting and money management in my business, but I don't really keep track of things personally. I've downloaded your Money Smart system as the first step to rectify this. Though I'm in a good position, my company pays for the vast majority of my expenses, like rent, electricity, the vehicles, fuel, that sort of thing. And I pay myself a small wage to keep saving for more properties, which I currently have 3, want to add to that, and personal items. My question is, which bank account, either the payments or the primary, should I pay my wage into? And I don't have a credit card. Currently, I've got my mortgage offset account with savings in it and an everyday account with a debit card that pays for everything, which I gather will become my living and lifestyle account. I'm just unsure of how to set it all up and would just really appreciate any help. Thanks.
Ben, Money Smarts 101. We love it.
Yeah, we love it when people are looking at organize. So here's a lesson for everyone. You got a little bit of gold there around in my business, I'm well organised and I have a budget and I look after myself and I know the profitability. Take that same applied principle and habits and behaviours and bring that into your household. And so what we heard there was really clarification around how we like to organise our jars, and in the digital world, our virtual jars. So we have the primary account, and that's exactly where all of those wages should be going. That's the home where all your money should be at. So I think from that point of view, Kylie, I would like to see all surplus money being parked into that account. All rents should be going into that account. We also see people making mistakes in terms of putting the rent for the investment properties into a separate account. No. If you've got a principal debt, a principal place of residence with a non-deductible owner-occupied debt, we want all the rent going into that offset account, and then basically all of those loans being paid from that account. So you set up your direct debits from there. Yep, definitely the case that the debit card that's linked is going to be renamed the Living and Lifestyle account. And there's really not much more to getting that hygiene right for Kylie. She's doing a lot right. Congratulations on on the activity that she's already done in getting those properties in order. And now she's bought both of the books. She's got the rules-based money management system in the instruction manual, and she's potentially going to learn a little bit more about some of the drivers around property investing and what to look for from a property perspective point of view.
And it's really just a case of trying to automate your world, really, isn't it? There's so much automation now, and what we're trying to encourage all of our community to do is automate your finances.
Yeah.
And the little tip here is for anyone who's listening to this who's new to our community, you can actually go and get our book for free, makemoneysimpleagain.com.au. It's the digital version. But the thing is, when you read that book, it is like your kids could understand it. It's such a primary school level basis of the book. It's the way that we set things up. So really the concepts are so incredibly easy to understand. It's the human behavior that we're trying to give you a life hack on, because human behavior is the stuff that gets in the way. So if we give you a life hack on how for you to get out of the way, so that you've got very specific places that you spend for living and lifestyle, and then you've got very specific places that you park all of your money, and then you get rid of all the surplus accounts. I cannot stress this enough. It's so straightforward. But I picked up that point too, Ben, that it's the mechanic who doesn't look after their own car.
Yep, the plumber
Kylie
with a
said
leaky tap. Yep.
She's brilliant in her business, but not so good personally. That's not okay. That's not okay. This is not judgment to Kylie. This is saying to everyone, it's not okay that you don't have your personal finances sorted, because it is such an important part of everybody's life that it's just not okay that we don't have this sorted out.
10 minutes a month, Bryce, 10 minutes a month. And if I can make a prediction, as banking and open banking and bank feeds and all of these things are going to change over the next couple of years, it's going to be even less. Most of it's going to be automated for everybody. So that's an exciting thing. So there really isn't any excuse to get yourself into a rules-based money management system that can help you control and organise your money. And, we'll continue to keep serving our fantastic community in, 25,000 people, sort of registered to use our platform. It's just exciting that people are seeing, I want something that's easy, simple, doesn't take up all my time. I don't have to track my finances. I just check in once a month. And in the future, potentially that check-in will be automatic because of those bank feeds. So exciting times.
There you go, Kylie. Hopefully that's helped you. We're going to send you, reach out to us, let us know. I think we've got your details. We'll let you know that we'll give you a free audio book of the Armchair Guide to Property Investing. Thanks for being brave to share your question on SpeakPipe, because we know that speaking on those sorts of things is not easy for everyone. So there you go. Next one, Ben, that we're going to go through is from Carrie. Let's have a little listen to what Carrie's question is.
Hi there, I'm Carrie, and I just want to say that I love the podcast and I've been listening day in and day out, trying to catch up since I first heard about you guys. I had a question about the best type of asset I should invest in. I'm looking to buy my first property, which I'll live in initially, and I have a budget of $750K. I've been looking at 70s and 80s freestanding villa units in small blocks of 2 to 6 in Melbourne Southeast. This puts me in the middle ring suburbs around 20 k's from the city with a land size of around 150 square metres. It's a good balance between having a decent land mass without being out in the sticks. Alternatively, I could buy a 2-bedroom apartment in an older, low-density block, the type with only 2 or 3 stories, closer to the CBD. Are these good investment options, and which would you think is a better buy? Or is there anything else I should look into? I love your work, guys, and keep bringing out those podcasts. Thank you.
Oh, I mean, I don't think Carrie is going to have any trouble at all with getting some solid returns on choosing either a townhouse well located in a desirable area where it's not one of too many and you don't have too much homogenous or similar stock in that particular thing versus, as we say, going towards that 2-bedroom apartment closer in a low density block. My feeling is, and the history tells me, that the land appreciation will happen stronger on that 2-bedroom apartment block. And if you've got a little bit of charm and character in that block, that over time, and we're thinking, 40, 50 years, you've got to think about that longevity and the masterclass that we had with Scott Keck a couple of weeks ago, that there is going to be rejuvenation. Our skyline is going to increase, and that is potentially going to bode well for those types of apartments. But also, we're a big believer in land to asset ratio. So again, getting that sort of townhouse and getting that little bit of extra livability in terms of floor space and potentially courtyard or backyard in that villa unit is also going to be pretty well received as well. So it's a very difficult call because we are talking about the eastern suburbs here of Melbourne. That's where the money trail is. That's where the land values look really, really strong and have performed consistently over the last 40 to 50 years in the data that we've looked at. So from that point of view, I think you're on the right pathway. It's just about, that I always go to this point, try and make sure you maintain owner-occupier appeal. Don't try and look for anything that's going to be replicated and easily putting pressure on the supply side, because that's where you can be caught out during different periods in the cycle.
Ben, my first mentor when I was understanding the Melbourne marketplace when I came over from Perth, used to talk about the Fertile Crescent of Melbourne. And so the way that he described it, Jack was his name, he would go Richmond, Hawthorn, Kew. Imagine that straight out to the east, and then imagine you had a paintbrush stroke on a map, and you had the paintbrush just stroked all the way through to the bay in a semicircle. He said that's the Fertile Crescent, right, of Melbourne. That's where most people aspire to want to live, even if they can't get in there. There's a real strong aspiration. So what I like about Carrie's question here is, at face value, it looks like she wants to be in the Fertile Crescent, right? So, so location does 80% of the heavy lifting. So therefore, we've got a tick there. Generous budget for a 2-bedroom apartment, depending on where she wants to be. But my interpretation of, talked about the freestanding villa unit. That's those old school single levels, driveway through the middle, and then bust off to the individual units. I personally really like them, and I've backtested a lot of them.
Yeah,
backtested a lot of them, and they perform really well, because you think back in the 70s and 80s, the density was less, but you have some really great streets, and quite often. So my thing for that is, if you want the outperform results, you've got to make sure they're within proximity on the train line, right? Because that's what makes Melbourne real estate pop, because we've got so much congestion in Melbourne, and Sydney is another example. So being close to the train line. So I would personally prefer to buy the freestanding villa unit. However, if you think about what she's also talking about, these older 2-bedroom apartments in low density, like that's 101 property couch speak, right? These old school flats rather than apartments, and they haven't actually performed so well over the last decade and a half, Ben.
No.
But I actually think going forward, because of the affordability and the density. So you think about how many people are going to pour into this city when the borders open again, and the fact that this, Scott Keck said for as far as the eye can see, you're going to have all of these high rises in the next 20, 30 years. So these ones will provide more and more scarcity in that particular segment. I don't mind it. So if there's a certain blue chip element around the suburb, Elwood's, although 750 is a bit low for Elwood, but Elwood's or Caulfield, Caulfield South, or certain parts of that Bay precinct. I think there's good opportunity, because I think the price elasticity of where houses have gone means that there's no viable alternative for anyone now. If they want to stay in those suburbs, they have to consider that as an option, which will increase the demand. But given the choice based on the information we have, I'd be leaning towards the freestanding villa unit. But I'll say it again, what I love about this question is it feels like Carrie's been listening to all of the stuff that we've been talking about over 304 episodes, Ben, that says asset selection is critical. And within these two categories of asset selection, she's ticking all the boxes.
Yeah, love it. No, nice question, Carrie.
Thank you, Carrie. Free audio book to you. We'll reach out, let you know that your question's on. We'll also let you know how to download that free audio book on the Armchair Guide to Property Investing. Hey, Ben, let's move to the next one. This one's from Mark Alchemy. Hopefully I got the surname right. Let's have a listen to Mark's question.
Hi, Ben and Bryce. Mark here from Sydney. First of all, want to really thank you for the efforts that you put in every week in making these podcasts available. I luckily stumbled on your podcast by accident about 6 days ago, as I was looking to get some information on Australian properties. And I must say the information that you've provided through your podcast has been nothing short of gold. So again, thank you for that. The thing that I'd like to know, so after working extremely hard for the last 5 years, and ever since graduating, I've finally saved up a 20% deposit to purchase my first property and be on my way to building a property portfolio, which is something that I've always wanted to do. However, I've sort of had an internal debate with myself, and I always seem to get conflicting opinions or ideas on this online. And I was hoping that you can clarify it for me, because I do value both your opinions. Now, my question is, does it make more financial sense to own your own home, or does it make more financial sense to be a rent investor? So rent a home and accumulate properties whilst renting. If you can clarify that for me, I will forever appreciate that. Thank you again, guys. Look forward to catching up on all your podcasts, and really look forward to running into you guys or attending any of your seminars if you hold any seminars. Thank you.
Rent vesting versus buying your own home, the modern debate.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and we've covered this several times, and we'll make sure we put in the show notes just a link to the article that we did for Money Magazine on this particular subject, because from Mark's point of view, the modelling suggests, and we've got to be very careful here, because if anything changes in terms of regulation and around tax returns and negative gearing and capital gains tax and all of that type of thing, that can potentially have an impact on, rent vesting. So we talk about, if you're going to rent vest, in theory, and you're building a plan for the future, you will continue to rent vest indefinitely. Now that's the classic model of rent vesting, as opposed to getting on the property ladder, because you can do very well in terms of buying that first home, whether it be a flat, as we were just talking about, or a townhouse, and getting into the market, and then leveraging from the growth in that to buy your next one and buy your next one. That is also an opportunity to build wealth over time. I mean, the goal is to potentially try and retain the first property that you bought and keep retaining them if you go on that journey. And that's been very consistent with the story of my past, other than the first property that I bought, which I got that bad advice for and sold. That should still be in the portfolio today. So that is the question. But technically speaking, we outline the pros and cons of the concept of rent vesting, and from the cons point of view, just remember you could be kicked out of your property. There's potentially what people think why you're renting. It's probably better to own. There's a lot of great debate, and you're having that own debate with yourself. So once you work through those pros and cons, but currently financially, depending on the assets that you buy and if they perform as per the forecast in the models, that rent vesting will give you a greater financial return. But that said, you remember it's, your home is your castle, it's yours. So you've got to weigh up what's important to you. And I think that's the important message here around your goals. If financial freedom and retiring early and those types of things are what drives you, then you may choose to rent vest. But if it is about comfort, ownership, making it your own, and and having a steady, more less aggressive, staged program to retirement, you'll be well served by just taking action, whichever way you go.
Rent vesting has become really popular in the last 5-10 years, Ben, but to me it's a lifestyle discussion. I've rent vested for a fair bit of my time because I'm a Perth boy who's lived on the Gold Coast, who's lived in Brisbane, I've lived over in London, Ben. I moved to Melbourne, I went back to Brisbane, I've moved back to Melbourne. It just doesn't make sense to keep transacting when you're doing that. So in your own home, I mean. So you need to think about what your lifestyle is. Are you someone who has lived in the same part of the world forever and are likely to stay in the same part of the world forever? It kind of makes sense that you put the big rock in the jar. Whereas if you got leaning towards someone like me, who's a Perth boy, who's ambitious, I wanted to move around a lot. So if that's part of your thinking, well, then that needs to be because the government's got a lot of money with stamp duty, Ben. You don't need to keep giving it to them, right? Mm-hmm. So there's two opposite ends of the scale. And I obviously live in my own home. There's a financial versus emotional thing. There's a feeling in your soul of living in your own home that you can't get from not living in your own home, but can be contrasted towards, it can be a very, very financially rewarding experience to rent vest only, because you can go and rent someone else's place in a really awesome lifestyle location at a much reduced, like a penthouse, a palace, whatever you want to do, and let someone else worry about all the maintenance and the expenses. So that's one way to do it. And the other thing I'd say too, Ben, is my thinking in my 20s matured to my 30s, which is now matured even further to my 40s. So you said it really well before, that rent vesting is a path that it's not easy to jump ship when you're midway through, because if you go hit the handbrake and go, actually, I want to put the big rock in the jar in now, that becomes challenging, because it's like, I don't know, can't think of a quick analogy. When you're using a program on your computer that all of a sudden just draws a heap of RAM that stops everything else. That's what it does when you're buying your own home. It draws a lot of resources. There's no tax advantage. The banks look at you differently when they service, all that sort of stuff. So rent vesting can't be a fad. It has to be something that you think that you'll stay the course on, because it has received a lot of popularity. But also, beware to the 20s who think about rent vesting, because when you're 20s, you're footloose, fancy free, no commitments. Think that life is one big party, right? No, actually, that's not true. It's a bit generalistic, but you know what I mean. Like, you've just got all these free thoughts in your 20s that you don't necessarily have to think about when you get to your 30s and 40s, right? So that's what I would say about the two strategies, because I think if you put them back to back, financially it stacks up to be a rent vester. But that's if you live in a vacuum and you don't throw emotion into the mix.
Yeah, now, I mean, obviously, as rent vesting has become more and more popular, people are using that term for when they might buy a property. So they live with mum and dad. They've bought a property because their mum and dad have helped them out, which is great. They're renting that property out, but they had no intention of living in there. That was just going to be an investment. And then they go and rent somewhere closer to the city so they can be with their friends and obviously meet new people and potentially meet their future life partner, right? Now, that over a 5 or a 10 year period. Now, was their intention to keep, rinse and repeating on that model? That's what we would call rent vesting. But some people just sort of say, and spruikers and potentially advisors might say, well, just rent vest. And now for us, that's like, okay, well, if that's the plan, that you hold that asset for 10 years, because that should be the minimum time frame that you ever hold an asset where you get the best benefit, because you're going to have to pay some capital gains tax if it wasn't your principal place of residence, and then you're going to turn that into the deposit for your new home, for your new future husband or future wife. That's different, right? So we wouldn't necessarily call that long-term rent vesting, and financially it wouldn't have the same level of return. So that's where we come back to that important point, is we just want you to act. Mm-hmm. We don't care, and act with a time frame of 7 to 10 years, not with a time frame of 3 to 5. Because if you're acting with a time frame of 3 to 5, you put yourself in a corner, and you run the risk of not necessarily getting that capital growth, and the amount of capital growth that you've probably realised at that point in terms of the compounding return will probably just be enough to not only just cover the stamp duty, but also the interest that you've paid on that property over time. And then you've got to pay 50% to the government of the income that you earn or whatever as capital gains. So that's why it's important to sort of say, if you're going to get on the property ladder, we would say go and live in it if you can, and that'll be a principal place of residence. If your circumstances change and you've got to move out, it's still your principal place of residence for up to 6 years. So just be mindful of that. So that means that any capital gains potentially, and speak to your tax agent about that, would be capital gains tax free. But that's ultimately what we're talking about. So if you're going to Rentvest, it is a long-term program where you've got, the cost of your rent is cheaper than the mortgage that you're paying. And with interest rates as low as they are at the moment, there still might be an argument to actually get out and get that mortgage first and go and live in that property. So it is definitely a changing world when it comes to rent vesting.
Very good. Hopefully that helps, Mark. Good question. We get it a fair bit. I think it's worth just reinforcing those principles. Hey, two things for you, Mark. One, we're also going to give you a free copy of our audio book. So to say thanks for putting in a question. And two, at the end, you talked about attending one of our seminars. We do webinars. We haven't done any this year, Ben. We are going to do one in October. And it's you and I are going to actually go into the weeds and show people how to build a portfolio. We're going to show you the strategy, and then we're going to go into the practical. We'll actually do a live build of a portfolio. So what I want to say to those folks who have joined our community this year, we did a fair few of them last year. We haven't done any this year. So two things. I'd encourage you to go to our Facebook page and like us there, because we will notify you there. And also go to the Property Couch homepage, Ben, and download our book, because then we'll have your email address so that we can actually send you a notification of that webinar as well, because it'll be really insightful, and we're going to really unpack how it gets done to marry all of the concepts that we're talking about here on the podcast. We'll show you a type of property we purchase. We'll show you the plan. We'll show you how you can do that without affecting the budget. Essentially, how to build a $2,000 per week passive income with 5 properties or less is what we'll do, without renovating, redeveloping, or sacrificing your weekends. So if that's you and you want to be a part of that, just be known to our community so that we can notify you when we do that, because that's really, really important. But good question, Mark. We are going to send you a link with that audio book, and we hope that you enjoy that. Hey, Ben, what I thought would be interesting, given on the backdrop of our conversation with Scott Keck a couple of episodes ago, and I think I really want to encourage anyone who hasn't got around to listening to that to go and do it, right? But I wanted to pull one of the questions out of the archive that we've done before, because on the backdrop of the conversation that we've been having, COVID since, some of the performance of some of these areas, some of the people that are escaping from the city, I think that the conversations that we had with Scott are really, really important. And this question here from the archive actually helps us to reinforce those points. So it's a question from Jack.
And answering it in the current context, I think, is also helpful, right? That's what we've attempted to do
Spot on.
in terms of, this question.
Yeah, so as I said, we've pulled this out of the archive. It's a question from Jack Beardsley. It's really relevant, and as Ben says, we want to answer that in today's context. So let's have a little listen and remind ourselves of that question from Jack.
Hi there, guys. Just want to say, first up, I've only just tuned into your podcast recently, and I'm absolutely loving it. I'm going to be buying a couple of books too. They got a lot of great reviews, and yeah, I'm really excited to read them. Fellas, I've just got out of debt, and I'm looking at starting my property investment journey about this time next year, December 2020. Now, I'm following a couple of property investors. One guy, he's currently investing up in Brisbane. This other guy that I follow as well, he stays purely local in Victoria, mainly Melbourne. He's explained to me with the growth corridors, how they're not really growth corridors, Pakenham, Wyndham Vale, Tonne, Point Cook, and I've had a look in there. They don't average as much as what I thought they would. Nice places, but yeah. I can't afford to invest in Melbourne itself. And the difference in the two is one saying he's starting off people up in Brisbane, getting their introduction into the property market up in Brisbane for around about the 500K mark. And the other guy who invests only in Victoria, his suggestion was start out, say, somewhere like Bendigo or Ballarat, He doesn't believe Geelong's got good growth. Yeah, I'm hesitant to go Bendigo or Ballarat because they are inland, but I'm also afraid that my judgment's being clouded. I grew up in coastal areas. I've always lived near the coast. I've always loved the coast. If you guys give me your opinion, that'd be fantastic. Well done again on the podcast. I'm absolutely loving it, and I've watched 7 episodes today.
Bryce, I mean, obviously that was, that speak patch from a little while ago. That's okay. More generally speaking, there's some interesting stuff there, right? It is about looking at the timing the market versus time in the market and looking at what you can afford to buy at that time. So where we see from a demand supply point of view, there's definitely some pockets currently in Brisbane Vegas that are showing some really good numbers. So in that price range. But interestingly enough, also Geelong down in that price range. The Greater Geelong is also got some marketplaces there as well. Now, when I think about regional areas, I don't think about their CBDs as being areas that attract huge income growth, right? So because they're not really big, huge knowledge centres. Normally these regional centres have, and I'm generalising here, but they normally have some call centres. So like, Geelong has the NDIS as a call centre down there. And so that's, some okay to solid average household wages and so forth. What Geelong has, work safe. And so I think that there is, definitely some solid employment, and that bodes well for the Greater Geelong. But it's also the proximity to the knowledge centre that is Melbourne. And obviously, now that we've had the pandemic and the work from home sort of stuff that's going on, and the commentary around, this move away from the cities and the like, I'm not so sure that that's going to play out, on scale that would warrant longevity. I think, like a lacquer band, it'll probably, retract back in as we get back to our normal lives once vaccines and all of that are through the system. So that said, that's why I like Geelong, because it's proximity to Melbourne and speed in which you can get to work and potentially have that. Brisbane, on the other hand, well, that is, third largest capital city. It's part of Greater Southeast Queensland, which, if you think about that over the next 20 or 30 years, the merging of, sort of Sunshine Coast, Gold Coast and Brisbane as a whole, a significant central business district, obviously being hit a bit by, what's happening with some of their bigger employees, like Flight Centre is a big corporate up there. You've still got Suncorp Bank and a few others. But so my view is, it's still a very interesting call generally about which market I would go to, and that's why I'd be looking at the demand supply ratio and then trying to get into a market where there is a good demographic of people, there is lifestyle amenity, infrastructure in that area, and then think about the job opportunities around that, not only localised but also in that sort of central business district.
Yeah, good one, Ben. I think about this from the perspective of I see, obviously, as a buyer's agent at the coalface of the purchase decisions. I see this dilemma in investors all the time. Where should I go? Where's best? Because they're chasing this nirvana of comparing two side by side, and you can't compare a house really in Geelong with a house in Brisbane, because it's just so it's like two fingerprints. They're never the same, right?
Mm.
And I guess the overwhelming principle I want to share here is, it doesn't matter about comparing one versus the other. What matters is, what do you actually need to fulfill the plan that you're trying to do, right? Because if you begin with the end in mind, someone who has modest needs for their passive income could have modest growth, versus someone who's got really aggressive needs for their passive income needs really aggressive growth. So the reason I'm saying that is because when we backtest properties, Ben, in Melbourne and in Sydney, we're quite comfortable that there's precedent historically that you can get 7% growth, right? In some cases, on the ones where you've got land, location do 80% of the heavy lifting, and then we layer on top of that a really scarce asset like a beautiful old property that also does a bit of the heavy lifting for capital growth. We've seen 8s, 9s, 10s, Rarely do I have any confidence over 10 for long term because something must have happened. But generally between that 7 to 10. But in Brisbane, when we back test it, typically we're getting sixes, Ben. And in Geelong, typically we're getting sixes, right? So the point is, does a 6% growth, is that a worse performing asset than something that's got 9% growth? Well, at face value, maybe. But if you can't afford the one that's getting 9%, Ben, or it puts you into enormous financial pressure, or it's some of these beautiful older properties, they have a lot of maintenance spend. You might buy them, and they, if you can hold them for 20 years, they are going to serve you very well. But if you get a window of time, 9 months, where the bathroom needs redoing and the back stumps need redoing, and all of a sudden there's a bit of maintenance cost that comes from it, you need to be able to cash flow that. You need to be able to have the equity reserves that allow you to stay in the game long enough to enjoy the 20 years of holding one of these beautiful scarce assets. So I guess we've got a discussion. Is it growth corridors? Do I buy in Geelong, Bendigo, Ballarat, or even up into Brisbane? What I would say about the Geelong, Bendigo, Ballarat is circle back 2 weeks ago and listen to Scott Keck. He beautifully and eloquently described what you should be thinking about Bendigo, Ballarat and Geelong. But just in summary, because of the smaller size that Victoria is and the sheer number of people that we have, they're more considered outer suburbs, more Geelong than the others in my view. But he's been doing this for over 50 years, so far be it for me to sort of question his view that Bendigo and Ballarat are outer suburbs of Melbourne as well. So I think that if you buy in those suburbs, that's fine. I would tend to agree with some of those growth corridors. I think I'd prefer to go a bit further out to Geelong, because there is a bit of lifestyle on offer. There is some character homes around there. There is an established city centre. But again, if I go back to my opening point, Ben, it's horses for courses, which is why we've talked about the road to the summit of $2,000 a week requires you to actually have some planning and some milestones and to be focused on data. If we talk about if you talk about Google, if we went to Google and said, what do you think about this ad? They go, it doesn't matter what I think about it. What does the data say? It's kind of the same when it comes to someone's portfolio. What does the data say you need? What does the data say that you need to achieve? And therefore, what property do you need to actually achieve that? So all I'd say is we're buying in Geelong. We're buying in Brisbane as a team. We've bought in Ballarat. We haven't bought in Bendigo at this point in time. And we haven't bought in the growth corridors that we've described here. So hopefully...
Those growth corridors, Bryce, exactly what you're saying, the Pakenhams, the Wyndham, that they are just, there's too much vacant land there. That is not the place to be buying any of those growth corridors where you've got a lot of supply coming online. They will definitely underperform. So when we are talking about Geelong and Bendigo and Ballarat, we're actually talking about buying in the established areas where that stock's fully utilised, aren't we?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And the important thing about these growth corridors, Ben, is they are population growth corridors, not necessarily capital growth corridors. And we need to make sure that they marry up. And one of the challenges we have with these corridors, Ben, is they don't have a suitable cross section of people living in them. So you go to any suburb within the middle to inner to middle ring, you generally will have all sorts of demographics. You'll have aspirational millennials, you'll have empty nesters, you'll have Gen X, you'll have everything in between, right? Whereas when you go to some of these growth corridors, you typically have a very similar demographic, same borrowing capacity, same time in their job cycle, same amount of kids, same amount of credit. So that cross section is missing. So if they are affected by a recession that we're in, Ben, or they're affected by a particular industry where a lot of these people work, that will severely affect the suburb versus somewhere else where that cross section is okay. If someone falls out, someone is ready and willing to take their place.
Yep, beautiful. Well said.
So Jack, great question. Thanks for that. I'm going to tell a little backstory. Emma puts all of these speak pipes into a beautiful little spreadsheet for me, Ben. But there was a communication issue that I just didn't get until the other day when I said to Em, why haven't we had many speak pipes lately? And she goes, what do you mean? I said, well, I've gone into the Trello board, and she goes, oh, it's in the spreadsheet. So basically, I've gone into the spreadsheet and seen just an enormous amount of questions that people. So I cannot wait to showcase them. So clearly, Emma's done a great job, and I haven't. So stay tuned. So that's
stay
why.
Tuned for a few more Q&A weeks with plenty of speed pipe questions.
refers to a little while ago, but the content's still really relevant. All right, Ben, some super questions. So I just want to thank those who contributed today. Thanks to Trevor. Thank you to Kylie. Thank you to Carrie. Also to Mark. And of course, Jack, returning guest to the Property Couch. And hopefully that's been benefit in terms of that modern day, or that sort of current day context to that question. So a bit of fun, Ben.
Beautiful. Yeah, lots of fun. Love it. Always love answering the questions from our community.
Now, I want to encourage you folks to go to our homepage. There's a little widget on the right. You can press a button. It's super simple. And for people now who are so Zoom, Zoom savvy, Ben, Skype savvy, it should be super simple for you to go in there, press record, and just let us know what your question is, because we love answering questions that are at the coalface in today, rather than us trying to guess what it is that you want to listen to. So we want to encourage you to do that. And who knows, Ben, and we'll give away some free stuff for people who answer a question. So I'm sure you'll get some free stuff in return for being brave enough to share your question with everyone. One other thing too, Ben, is last week I said that we've got the audio book, and I got a little bit of feedback that it might not have been super clear the way I described it. So at the moment, we're negotiating with Audible and all those sorts of things. So hopefully we'll get that into the traditional channels soon. But the only way to get the audiobook right now is by going to thearmchairguide.com.au and getting a free paperback version of the book, Ben. So you go there, you say, yes, I want the paperback. And then you can click on, you pay for the postage. We bought the book, we'll send it to you for free. And then once you've done that, there will be an option that says, do you want to upgrade your order to get the audiobook? And if you want to buy the audiobook, you can. But what we've done is we've bundled the audiobook so that you can actually listen to it. We've got the Kindle version, we've got the PDF version, we've got the supplemental PDF version. So there's a real bundle that goes with that. But so you can upgrade and pay for the audiobook, or you can just get the free book if you just prefer to listen to it, Ben. But I got some feedback that I wasn't super clear about that last week. So I just wanted to clear that up, which kind of leads into my life hacks today, which I've got 2 reading hacks, Ben.
Oh, okay. Yep.
There is a saying that if you're a CEO, you should read a book a week, right? But I'm not a CEO. You're not the CEO anymore. Most of our listeners don't, not necessarily a CEO. Some of them are, of course. But if you're not a CEO, perhaps you don't need to aspire to that book a week, because for most people, my suggestion and part 1 of my life hack is, instead of reading a lot of books, Ben, try reading a few books a lot of times. So let's let that land, because particularly if you like property or money management and you like our book, great. If you like one of the other books that are on the bookshelf around that, but the idea is, once you've found something that resonates with you, read it 3, 4, 5 times, Ben. If you want those concepts to land. I've got a number of books. We're going through How to Win Friends and Influence People. I wish I had read it a couple more times in the last 20 years. So I'm diving deep. I'm seeing stuff that I didn't see before, and it's been super helpful. So again, instead of reading a lot of books, Ben, unless you're a CEO, you've got to read one a week. But instead of reading a lot of books, try reading a few books a lot of times. So that's part 1. Part 2 is, if you are time poor, I don't know if you tried speed reading. I've tried it, Ben. I get frustrated with it. I'm not a very fast reader. I try to speed it up, and then all of a sudden I go through the technique of being a speed reader, and then all of a sudden I'm focused on the technique, and then I go, gasp! I can't even remember what I just read.
The comprehension is lost in most cases in my mind. I can't do it. No.
So I don't have the patience, because the time it'll take me for me to learn the speed reading, I get frustrated. So it's like me learning my touch typing is like three fingers on my left and 4 on the right. And I wish I could just be a normal speed typer, but I don't have the patience to slow down and actually get my technique right. So it's for one of those things. So my hack is this, Ben. If you listen to, and I've done this and it works, if you listen to the audio book when you're actually reading the book, what you can do is pace it, which is the technique of speed reading, which you've got to use your finger to pace it and get it fast, right? You can actually just bump up the speed 2x. For me, I go up to 2.5x. Sometimes if I'm in the zone, I'll go to 3x, Ben, not very often. But you can speed it up through what's going into your mind, but you can also be watching the words on the page to add for the comprehension so you can still retain it. So, Ben, audiobook and the physical book can actually help you get through some stuff a bit quicker. So if that's you, I'd certainly encourage you to do that. I've done it. I find it helpful. And maybe if you haven't done it, consider doing that. So, and of course, Ben, you can do that with our book. You can read the book and listen to the audiobook. So let me know what you think. I'd love to get some feedback on that one. People, if you've done it, has it worked? Let me know on Facebook. Send me an email. I'll certainly read it out.
Yeah, look, I've done it both ways, mate. I've done it with big textbooks that you're trying to get through, and you're like, okay, well, that's a solid bit of learning, and there's some lot of information in there. So I might listen to the audiobook and say, yeah, this is phenomenal. So I buy the hard copy and get my highlighter and try and get the best areas that I can.
Yeah.
So I've done it, and I've also done it the other way where I've bought the audiobook first and gone, yep, this is great. Or I bought the hard copy book and then like, I want to listen to this in the car because I need it to land again and again and again. So you can do it both ways. So, when I really love a book, I'll normally have an audio and a physical copy of it.
Or even just doing it on the Kindle as well, Ben, which we've got available as well. Hey, what's making property news, Ben?
Bryce, what's making property news? I just thought we'd have a little snapshot into the upcoming auction market, Bryce. So it's been obviously fascinating with Victorian stage 4 lockdowns. We've never seen these sort of numbers before, but I just wanted to quickly talk about what's happening this weekend, so this will be a snapshot in time if someone's come to this podcast at a later date. But there are 968 capital city auctions that are being tracked by the good friends at CoreLogic this week. That's an increase on the previous week of 816. So another 150 odd auctions increase, right? So now the same time last year, Bryce, in the spring selling season, there was 1,983. Now, why the difference? Big difference there. Well, Melbourne, rightio. Melbourne, 14 auctions are on the radar this week.
Can't buy a property when you're a battery hen, Ben.
That's right. 13 last week. And considering last year, there was 1,020 auctions were held across the greater metropolitan Melbourne area. Now, that's interesting, right? So there are 726 Sydney home schedules for auction this week. So now that compared to last week, right? So because we're measuring all capitals with that full number at the top I mentioned. So the 600 homes were taken to auction 1 year ago. So that's important to know, right? So, there's 600 odd auctions that were taken last week and 646 last year. So there are more auctions this year than last year, right in the middle of a pandemic. So we'll have to see what happens there. Now, as for the other markets, you're talking about Canberra, 74, Adelaide, 73, Brisbane, 60, 66, Perth, 13. Not really. And Tassie's got 2. So, not really much.
Numbers.
Yeah, they kill it. But that just sort of gives you an idea. Now, the other thing I've been tracking, Bryce, is the CoreLogic hedonic price index. And what I'm noticing, and I get that every week, an update on that every week, and it's very clear in terms of the latest results coming through. Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth, Darwin, all in positive territory, Bryce. So we've seen another click in terms of Queensland and Brisbane market going into positive. And Sydney's last week result was only negative 0.1. So I suspect over the course of the next couple of months that will move, weeks and months, that'll go to flat and into positive. So the only, at the moment, ugly duckling is the Melbourne market because of these lockdown, and potentially what's being sold is relatively forced sales. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But you're talking potentially of the bigger markets across Australia, every market potentially in positive growth territory except for Melbourne coming into the end of the year. So that's just something we'll keep an eye on in, once every month to see how that's tracking.
Good intel. Thank you, Ben. That is what's making property news this week. And mate, just before we sign off, I just wanted to do a quick housekeeping shout out. I haven't done it for a while, but if you are new to our community, what I want to encourage you to do is the first 20 episodes are really important. So the hack here is you go back, start from the beginning, but do us at 1.5 speed. It'll do two things. One, get through them quicker, and two, you'll be able to stop us being sort of gibberish, amateurish at the beginning. But those the concepts that we talk about in the first 20 episodes are really, really important. So that's number one. And number two, so that's if you're new to community. And number two, if you've been with our community for a little while, Ben, we certainly look at and appreciate all of the reviews that we get on iTunes. So if you've got a chance to go and give us a review, that would be super helpful, because we've said it before, we don't know how the iTunes algorithm works, but we do know it rewards people who listen and the reviews. So if we could get our message out to more people, and you have actually received value from this, it is our request of a favour from you, that you would go and leave us we say it all the time, Ben, we wish it's a 5-star review, but if it's 1 star, that's totally fine. Give us the feedback, we want to learn. But if you can give us a review, that'd be super, super helpful. And we would love for you to be on our Facebook and Instagram pages, Ben. So go and follow us at The Property Couch, because we put little behind the scenes and extra content and Facebook Lives and a whole bunch of stuff that's there. We're trying to continually add value to our community through that space. So just a couple of little shout outs there, Ben, that I haven't done for a little while, but they are appreciated by the team here, because it's more than you and me in this team. So it helps give some feedback to Ivis and Emma as well, that they know they're doing a great job. But also those first foundational episodes are critical, that you know those.
Beautiful. Well said, mate.
Mate, until next week.
Knowledge is empowering, Bryce, but only if you act on it. Go Pies.
Mate. See you next week, folks.
Hey there folks, Bryce Holdaway here. Before you go, if you're new to our community and only listen to maybe a handful of episodes, I thoroughly recommend that you go all the way back to episode number 1, where we unpack all of the foundations when it comes to property investing. Now, for those of you that might be a little bit time poor, I've got good news for you. We have a binge guide that you can download straight away, which summarises the first 20 episodes where Ben and I unpack the foundational pillars of the A, B, C, D, and so much more. And you can get that straight away. If you go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20, you can download it and consume it whenever you want. It's completely free and available now. And for those of you, just a quick reminder that nothing we've spoken about today constitutes financial advice. We recommend that you reach out to your licensed professional advisor so that you can look at your unique circumstances before acting on any information. Now don't forget, go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20 and get your binge guide today.